Hey friends, I've got a data factory framework like many other people, and I wanted to move that thing to Fabric, but mine is based upon looping through one single connection to an Azure SQL DB and changing that connection on the fly to collect data from as many Azure SQL DBs as you want to. And that doesn't seem to be possible in Fabric just yet. It looks like it's on the roadmap for Q1, so who knows? I haven't seen anything, so I don't know. Maybe maybe it will be announced in FabCon in a few weeks. Let's see. I don't know. I really don't. In the meantime, I thought I would just show you what I have right now, in case you want to build one yourself. Let's see. So what I have here is I've split it up in 3 pieces, so I'll make it more complicated as we go along to keep the explanation simple. In my demo system, I have, let's start with the linked servers to the systems that I have. I have a linked server to a metadata database, which does not have any parameters. It just points to the metadata database. This is where I get my information, which SQL servers I want to read, and I don't change that on the fly. There is also my source SQL server, which doesn't point to a specific SQL server, but it has parameters. So as you can see here, it has an FQDN, a fully qualified domain name, and a database name. So I change these parameters on the fly here. And then last but not least, I have my landing zone, a storage account, and the storage account has no parameters here because I'm not changing which storage account I want to use. This is just my landing zone. So from the linked servers, we move to the data sets. So let's show you the data sets, and I'm using the same in all my demos. So I have the metadata data set that has no parameters, it just points to the metadata. Then there is the SQL Server source, which on the linked servers, it has a fully qualified domain name and a database name, so the data set does the same thing, it just gets passed along from the pipelines. And my landing zone also has 2 parameters. I don't change the landing zone itself, so the linked server doesn't have any parameters, but the dataset does. I have a directory and a file name that I pass on from the parameters, from the pipelines. So let's start with a simple one. I have my example pipeline number 1. It's the main. That just goes out to my metadata and grabs the servers. It's a really straightforward select SQL server from ADF metadata, really simple, and I can even preview the data, and there we go. It's 2 demo SQL servers where it will just connect to. Now I'm passing these into a for each. There's the setting, the items. The lookup items go into the for each, and then I execute the pipeline. There's 2 reasons why you call a pipeline from a pipeline. First of all, if you connect to a SQL server and you're doing something in there, like grabbing all the tables, and then you're in a loop connecting to a different SQL server in a different thread, because this is all multi-threaded stuff, it loses the connection with the other one, and you get an error that it can't find the table that you were downloading anymore. So you can't do that. You have to call another pipeline. Also, much simpler reason, you can't put a for each in a for each, and I want to go from multiple servers to all the databases to all the tables. So I have 3 for each loops basically. So I have to call all the pipelines. So that's what I'm doing here. So in my case, I have the databases pipeline, and I'm passing it the SQL server that I want to connect to. So if I go to the databases pipeline, I get the FQDN as a parameter from the other pipeline, and then I do another loop, and I get the databases from sys.databases. So I'm connected to the master database. So this one needs 2 parameters, FQDN, and then I just connect to master, and I get the database names from sys.databases, and I don't want master. If you would connect to an on-prem, you would also have to exclude MSDB, TempDB, and model, but since this is an Azure SQL DB, master is enough. So that I feed into another for each, which in turn calls another pipeline because now I want to get to the tables. So here I call the tables pipeline and I feed it the qualified domain name and one of the databases that I found. So for each database it calls this loop. So you go into the tables, gets the parameters, and then I do a lookup again, and here is where it gets a little bit more complicated. Not that crazy, but I'm running a query that grabs the schema name and the table name, puts it in between brackets, so it just in case it's a table name with spaces in it or something. And I am also creating the same table name and schema name, but I'm replacing spaces with an underscore, because if I want to save it as a file, it doesn't like the spaces either, and I don't like the spaces, so I'm just creating a cleaned version of it that I can use for the file name later. And I also do the same with columns. I'm using a string aggregate feature here, where I just create a list of column names, comma separated, where I replace the column name spaces in the column names with an underscore. My test database actually has a column with a space in it, so I had to do this right away in my base demo. This is also where you could cast certain types of columns that are not compatible, or you can exclude some of them if you wanted to, but I'll show you that in a later example. So far so good. So what does it do? So now there's no more call to a for each. Now we're actually going to save. Everything. So I have the table to parquet copy action, where as a source I'm running a query where I select all the columns from the schema name dot table name, and the schema name and the table name have brackets around them, so it's a nice valid query, and also the columns have brackets around them. I created that in the last query. And in the sync option, or the destination is called sync in Data Factory, I save it to a directory where I just make the directory the qualified domain name of the server, and then the database name, and then the schema name cleaned, where I removed the spaces and replaced them by an underscore. Not sure why I did a backslash and a forward slash, not sure where I'm mixing that up. I need to clean up this demo apparently. And then there's the file name, and the file name is just a table name cleaned.parquet. I'm just creating one file for every table. If you want multiple files per table, hey, you've got some homework. This is certainly possible in Data Factory. So far so good. All I need to do is run this thing. Let me show you this, kick this off. And this will, if we watch this here, go to all the servers. And once that's done for each server, it will call the databases pipeline. I can go in there and show you that when that is done, it does a for each. When that is done, it does a for each database, and then calls for every database that it finds. It calls the tables pipeline to grab all the tables. So let's go into one of those. And once it's done that, I'll move this up a bit, it does a for each table, and then grabs the tables and saves them to a file. And you can see it's working in parallel. This is nice parallelism going on. There's all kinds of settings. You can slow this down if it's too much for your source database or something, but by default I think it makes 50 connections, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it does. You can see in my landing zone, if I refresh that, I have 2 demo databases, and inside there's a 2 demo SQL servers. Inside there's 2 demo databases, and inside there I've got 2 schemas, and in the sales schema there are all my files. Now let's make this a little bit more complicated, and just a little bit. And in the last one we'll do quite a bit of an extra step. So in the second one, what I'm doing here is I've got an exclude and an include column in my metadata table. So now I can say, give me from the SQL server all databases except for this one. or just these ones. So you can include and exclude or exclude by choice. And all I'm doing is I'm creating that data inside T-SQL, because it's easy to do in T-SQL, where I just create an and clause for the query, where depending on if it's an exclude and an include, I'll add a not or I'll leave the not away, and I'm creating an in clause with the database name. So I'm doing an in these databases or a not in these databases. And then I feed that to the execute database pipeline, where in the database pipeline, let me see that here, where you get the list of databases, it then needs that information. So the query looks a little bit different. The query then uses that. So what I'm doing is select name as database name from sys databases, where name not equal to master, I had that before, and I'm just adding the and clause. So if I didn't fit, the query is built in such a way that if I didn't have anything in my includes or exclude, it will just not have an and clause. It will just be an empty space, which is fine in this query. And now I'm just pasting that behind it. I'm concatenating that basically in the query. So now it will say where name is not equal master, or it will say we're not equal master and name in with a list, or and name not in and a list, depending on if I used include or exclude. If I use them both, this is not going to work, right? This is an and or, this is an or situation. So that would just grab what I wanted to grab, so you can make some exceptions. Now, and I won't run this one, but I'll run the third one, because it's way more interesting, because I need that functionality for including or excluding into the third part. Because the third part, let's do this one. I am getting quite a bit more information from a metadata table. Now I have the include, the exclude for the databases, and also include and exclude for the tables, because now I want to say, listen, there are tables there that have a high watermark, that I have, for instance, a change date, and I want you to grab only the data that you didn't grab before. So if yesterday you went until midnight, then today I want you to go from midnight yesterday until now, or whatever you want to do. So that's why I need a database exclude and a table exclude, because probably not all of them have a change date. Not all your databases have named it maybe the same way, so you want to maybe make extra lines in your metadata table for the different column names that you have, so you can exclude some of them. You could even have a database where some of your tables have the change date, so you can make an include for those and then exclude them in the grab everything version, right? You can make multiple lines there. So I have the include and exclude, include for databases, include exclude for databases, and include exclude for tables. Then grab everything from last time. Don't use what I grabbed last time, but everything beyond that up until now. And now I take a minute off. This is what I do here. I've also seen systems that go from midnight to midnight, and you schedule it after midnight. Whatever works for you, right? I'm taking a minute off just to make sure that I'm not catching any poorly done transactions that are in flight, right? You never know with legacy systems. So I give it a minute. I go a minute ago, and give me everything from there. And then also I create two versions of that. I get the modified one, that's the from. I get the modified 2, that's the until. Then I get the new high watermark, that's also the until, but formatted in a different way, so I can save it back into the table. And I again format in another different way to function as the high watermark folder part, because I also want to save it. If today is March 25th, 2025. So you'd go at 2025, 03, 25th, and then for me it's almost 5 o'clock in Europe, so that will be 16:58, and that's where I'll save it. 16 for Americans is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So quite a bit more complicated. I like to do this in T-SQL because my metadata is saved in a SQL DB, and I know T-SQL well. So for me, it's easy to do all the finicky date stuff. Also, SQL Server works in such a way that if I use getDate multiple times in the same query, I get the same date. So I don't have to tinker with getting a date in a data factory pipeline and passing that through to the other ones if I want to do things in different parts of the data factory. I just do it in SQL. I like T-SQL, easy for me. So I'm done in one query. I feed very simple prepared information to my data factory. So then this just feeds it into the execute databases. So if I go to databases, you can see there's quite a lot of parameters now. I've got the domain name, I've got the databases that are included or excluded, I've got the from and until time, I've got the tables included or excluded. I've got the ID of the metadata row, because now I have to write back the new high watermark if it succeeds. If it fails, I want to just grab the same data again next time. But if it succeeds, I want to write that value back. So it's easy to have the ID of the record, right? And the high watermark folder, which is useful later for writing the location where it needs to be. So my databases looks a little bit different. I get the databases here, which looks the same. I get the and databases there. That didn't change. And then I pass the parameters along. But now just a bit more, so nothing spectacular. But now I'm also running a script when this is done, because for every database that it did, I am updating the metadata table, where I write an update statement. Update metadata, set change date is then the new high watermark where the ID is, and then the ID. And actually I got the ID as an int, so I have to convert it to a string here. I could have also probably got it as a string from T-SQL, but oh well. There's an easy transform function here. So nothing spectacular. And then I go to the tables, and then the tables, I have to do a few things as well, because now, let me make this a bit bigger so we can see. Here we go. Now the query that you saw before, that was a fixed query, but now I am concatenating something. I'm creating the query itself by adding something to it here in the pipeline. So this is the same query as before, where it takes the schema name and the table name, puts the brackets around, does the string aggregate for the casting of the column names and all these things that I did before. That didn't change, but now I've added where 1 equals 1, which is a really simple trick to make sure, like, hey, I might have an AND clause, I might not have, I don't know. And if I do, I don't want to figure out do I already have a where clause or not. I do. I just made a where 1 equals 1, which is always true. The engine ignores it. Doesn't cost any compute power, or hardly, I'm assuming. And I can just add the AND clause. And since my logic before doesn't give me an AND clause, it might just give me a space. If there's no AND needed, then also fine. So this is where I put the AND tables. So the in or not in for the tables. So I only get the tables that actually do have a high watermark. Here I'm also expanding this query a bit. I have the select column names from schema name and table name that I had before, but now I've also added where 1 equals 1, and I'm adding the change date before and until values if applicable. That's the cool part. I can just add them. If they're not there, it will just add a space in both cases. So all good. And then last but not least, I need to write them to a file, and then the directory name is the same as before. I got the server name and the database name, and not the same as before, where the directory name is now expanded with the high watermark folder structure. So you get the server name, the database name, then the date and time, and then the schema, And then at the end, I have the file name, which is the same as before. Now, if you don't want server name, database name, and then date, then year, day, year, month, day, you want it in a different order, that's homework for you. Let's run this. And I need to run the main, which does not have parameters. It just goes to the metadata. Go. So you hear a lot of people talking about metadata driven and dynamic. Sometimes they might be sort of interchangeable, but I see metadata driven as what I'm doing with my metadata table, where I have information on what the pipeline needs to do in some central location. So it goes out to the table and asks, hey, which servers do you want me to do? And some more complicated information like, hey, which ones do I need to do with the change date, and do I have includes and excludes? That's the metadata driven part. And then where it loops through these SQL servers and then finds the databases, finds the tables, and finds the columns, that's the dynamic part for me. I don't have to specify which tables, which databases, and which columns. I only have to do the includes or excludes. So that's metadata driven versus dynamic. If you disagree with me, let me know. And then there's one more thing that I'm also using. It's called convention over configuration. For instance, when you write the file to storage, I'm using SQL Server name, database name, schema name, and then maybe year, month, day, table name, .parquet. And I write a Parquet file, of course. That is called convention over configuration, where it's not discovered, it's not in metadata. I just create the location based upon the names of the sources. So those three things I combine in my pipeline, which obviously you have to do this in a different pipeline and recreate it a little bit if you have Oracle and MySQL and Postgres, because the metadata discovery is slightly different. Also, if you're using an integration runtime and you have on-prem SQL servers, your query might be slightly different, but you also have to call. You may have to copy paste your pipeline because the linked server that you're calling is different, and you can't connect to a dynamic linked server. You can't dynamically connect to a different linked server in a pipeline. It has to be the linked server, and then inside the linked server you can dynamically change the connection. So there's a few things that you have to copy paste still, but then again, it's all JSON underneath the cover, so you could probably find a way to copy and make that part dynamic as well in the deployment of the pipelines. Not dynamic in the running of the pipelines. This is dynamic while running, but if you need multiple copies, there might be a solution for that as well. That's all up to you. That's your homework if you want to do it differently than I did. I'm just giving you an example of what I did. This works for me. This is simple. I like this. This is rock solid. Data Factory grabs these databases en masse in parallel threads. It doesn't cost much the way I do it here. If you overdo it with the loops and the layers, it might get expensive. If you run this every 5 minutes and you have 1,000 databases, sure. But for me, this works in a lot of situations. I've deployed it in multiple places, and it's rock solid. So that works for me. So let's see if we're done. Seems to have worked. Here's my SQL Server again. If I click on that, that's my database. There is now the year, the month, the day, the hour, and the minutes. I've ran this a few times, as you can see. If I go to the last one, there's my sales LT schema, and there are the files. Like I said, if you want this in a different order, just change the code a little bit, right? Hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna slowly move over a lot of my stuff to Fabric. So if you're interested in learning along with me, watch this space. Bye.